Hey, Julie, thanks for joining us in studio today.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, so you are back to writing. Your European vacation is over, done, back to the grind. And this week, I'm learning about baby wipes, Julie Gunlock. The nanny state is far-reaching, even into places where we don't normally want to reach, without a baby wipe in hand.
You know your career is going well when you start writing about toilet paper, and mine is it's a career high for me. But I often write on parenting issues, and they look when you become a parent, you realize the value of baby wipes and wet wipes and things like that. You've got sticky kids. You're doing diaper changes. You don't always have a sink around, so these little, sort of wet wipe things that you can pull out are very useful. And some of them are flushable and some of them are not. Actually, baby wipes tend not to be flushable. Also, those cleaning wipes, as the mother of 3 boys, I clean my toilet daily. So I use a lot of those Clorox wipes. Those are not flushable, but there is a category of wipes that are flushable. And this story, when I saw this...
Tell me more.
Okay. It does get interesting. Okay, I know.
It
So
does.
boring.
It does.
Oh,
I
gosh.
know.
Even my husband didn't want to talk about this. Even my husband was like, I have nothing to say. So there is a category of them that are flushable, and people flush them, but they flush a lot of things down the toilets. And there's a lot of sewers in major cities are being clogged by wipes that are not flushable wipes. And so what the city does, this is a perfect example of how how governments get into the minutia of our lives. And often their solution doesn't even solve the problem. They often try to solve the problem, but they create new problems. And this is exactly a case of that, where they've essentially banned flushable wipes. They haven't banned the other ones. What they've done is they've banned the labeling of wipes as flushable. So you don't know which ones you can flush and which ones you can't. There are some people being kind of affected by this, parents who like these things, and nursing homes. They use a lot of these things. So that was my piece, talking about how ridiculous this is to actually harm the product that is flushable. Again, these flushable wipes, they disintegrate just like toilet paper. That's right, I'm talking about toilet paper on a news show. But again, the government didn't actually solve the problem. People are still going to flush things that they shouldn't be flushing. It's still going to be a problem for these city sewers.
This doesn't even seem to me like the preferred route that the nanny state would take. To me, it seems like the preferred route would be, okay, well, let's ban
everything.
The non-flushable wipes, because we like to ban stuff, or ban everything.
Or they would insist that
changing the labeling.
Well, yeah, or they would insist that every wipe has to be flushable, right? You would think that they would say, okay. The thing is that a lot of these non-flushable wipes, these are like the Clorox wipes, the makeup removers that your wife might use, they have plastic particles in them that do not break down. So that's what gets clogged in your drains. That's what clogs up toilets. And so the city government, instead of they could have demanded manufacturers change that, but they didn't. They actually said you can no longer label things flushable. So you're basically banning flushable wipes, and you've done nothing about these other products, which are really the cause of the problems. And I don't think they should do anything. I don't think they should ban those. But again, they've come up with a solution that does nothing to help or solve the problem. And I just think it's a perfect example. I use the flushable wipes as an example, but it's a perfect example of how government often makes things worse. It doesn't solve any problems. So again, I think if the government really wanted to solve this problem, they could have a public campaign. They could have a public notice campaign saying people really, you're a taxpayer. You pay for sewer systems. These are public utilities. We have some responsibility for them. Be careful. People also, they flush prescription medications down the toilet. People have gotten this habit, because our sewer systems they're a modern development. They've gotten in this habit of using them as trash cans. And so that needs to stop. Everything from medications to things that really shouldn't be flushed. So it is a fairly serious issue, though on a not so nice topic.
It is.
Where do
now
we
to
go
get
from
less
here?
serious, also don't use your trash can as a toilet. That
Right.
would be just keep the toilet to
Right.
the toilet stuff, keep the
Right.
trash can to the trash can stuff, right? Simple rule.
Right. Where do we go on
You'd
from
be
this?
amazed, having boys, how often you actually have to tell your sons this.
Yes.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you, Julie?
Yes, it's disgusting. My boys, well, I don't want to, I don't want to get into their privacy too much. But
Yeah,
let's
we'll
just
just
say, I
leave
think
it
this is a
there.
common
We'll
problem.
just leave it there.
I think it's a common problem, mom of boys. There's a lot of cleaning the toilet and cleaning the bathroom on a daily basis.
Yes. All right. So one of the other topics I wanted to talk about from
Let's move
I guess we
on.
went backwards because now we're going to talk about food, actual food, not the wiping that comes afterwards. Meals on Wheels, Julie.
Yes.
The cold-hearted budget of
Trump
Donald Trump wants
administration,
to
right.
eliminate Meals on Wheels, right? And this was a big thing for like 24 hours, and then it turned out to be not quite so dramatic after all.
Yeah, there was mass hysteria. The press went bananas, saying that that the Trump administration, he hates children, he hates old people, he hates everyone, and he's cutting Meals on Wheels, which it fits in perfectly with this narrative that Trump's a bad guy, that he hates people, that he wants to hurt the most vulnerable in society. So it fit in really well with that narrative, and so they went with it, and they were saying that again that Trump's budget cut Meals on Wheels. Not true. What Trump cut was a program called Community Development Block Grants. These are massive block grants, huge amounts of money that just go into the communities, federal dollars flood into communities, and there are really no strings attached. The government says, hey, use this money to fund these projects over here and these projects over here. And what they usually end up funding are these crony projects, these sort of bad business deals, these bad projects that are often wasteful, sometimes duplicative. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse going on with these programs. So community development block grants, I worked on the Hill about a decade ago, and I remember they were talking about cutting CDBG way back then. And so, this is a common thing. People talk about cutting CDBG. A lot of communities use those block grant funds to give a little bit of money to Meals on Wheels. So a tiny bit, like under 3% of Meals on Wheels funding comes from these block grants. 35% of the funding comes from the Older Americans Act, which has not been touched in Trump's budget. Now, the rest of the money, so that puts you up around 40%. The rest of the money comes from their Meals on Wheels fundraisers. They get money from foundations and from individuals and from very wealthy contributors. And so when you think about most of their money comes from foundation and traditional fundraising, a small portion comes from the Older Americans Act, again, not been touched. And then a teeny tiny under 3% comes from these block grants. That's what Trump wanted to cut. And again, most people who watch sort of, government funding and wasteful programs, applaud the Trump administration for cutting this. And that gap will easily be made up by either fundraising or they can get it. The states are welcome to make up that gap. So again, it was more mass hysteria. Walter Olson at the Cato Institute, he's a senior fellow there. He was the first one to sort of break the hysteria. He put out a series of tweets. He did basic journalistic digging, right? Which none of the journalists, including Jake Tapper, great guy, none of them were willing to do. You know what he did? I'm not kidding you. He went on Meals on Wheels website and looked up funding, and it said where their funding comes from. Older American Act, and it broke it down. So Walter Olson starts putting out these tweets saying, I think we need to calm down. This all seems hysterical. And then he later wrote up a piece for National Review, which was very instructive. So again, there's been a little backing off, but you know how these things happen. Everybody goes crazy. Everybody sets their hair on fire, and then there's never a retraction. Nobody ever comes back and says, we kind of went crazy. People are still talking about Meals on Wheels being cut.
And you're absolutely right. I'll give you a couple of headlines just recently here over the past. Well, hang on, it's gone now. All right, so I won't give you those headlines.
I'll make them up.
Today,
I'll make them up. Oh my God!
The headlines.
The elderly are going to starve.
Seniors worried about Meals on Wheels. Right.
Yeah.
But Reasons, Scott Shackford, a couple of days ago, had a piece about the Community Development Block Grant Program, and it's fascinating that you mentioned Jake Tapper because how he tweeted this. Right, he was just like, "Oh, this budget proposes, that the Community Development Block Grant Program, which funds programs like Meals on Wheels, is going to get cut. It's on the chopping block." And then no real talk about the actual block grants themselves. As you say, there are a lot of problems with fraud and corruption. Reason back in 2013 took a look at programs all across the country. They found in June of 2013, city of Pine Bluff, Arkansas, had improperly spent nearly $20,000 in these community development block grant funds and had failed to properly document an additional $279,000 in expenditures. The city was accused of spending more than 20% of the funds on, quote, administrative costs, purchasing properties without redeveloping them, dispersing funds to contractors before receiving bids, giving money before you
Slush
get a
fund.
bid on a project, Julie.
Yeah.
Paying for the work before you even get a bid.
Yeah, and he's a monster
and,
for cutting
not
this.
following federal right. Exactly. Like, so where is that reporting other than the Walter Olsons or the Reason magazines? Why
it's
isn't
over.
a Jake Tapper? Why isn't CNN? Why is that not being done on the network news? Why is it let's freak out the seniors that the Meals on Wheels program's going away?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like it's also with the NPR and PBS funding cuts. It's like, oh my, where will we? All these middle-aged, white middle-class women are freaking out that they won't see Poldark on Sunday. Oh my God, what am I going to do without my Downton Abbey? I mean, as if these shows wouldn't be picked up by another network. It's so ridiculous. And frankly, it's $450 million. The other thing that kind of bothers me though is on the other side of this, I've seen conservatives who were just like, thank God he's making these cuts. I mean, we're talking about trillions of dollars in entitlements that have not been touched. He's done nothing on entitlements. Okay, so we're not really, it's great, but this is definitely appealing to the base. I mean, of course, conservatives want PBS and NPR and all these programs cut. We've never been big fans of the PBS news programs because they're largely left-leaning programs. And so, but when we look at the whole budget for the U.S. government, first of all, it's absurd to get upset about these cuts when we've gone from $3.2 trillion government budget to $7 trillion, and we have a debt up to our eyeballs. We are not, I mean, this is great. It's great to have a $450 million cut to NPR, but it's a drop in the bucket. There's a lot more work needs to be done. And so people just need to calm down on both sides. It's not, it's great news. We're cutting all this stuff and it's not like the end of the world. The federal government is still every year increases spending.
I think entitlement reform is almost another issue entirely. I know that you're right in that it's a huge component of the budget, but because it is this big monster, I think that almost has to be dealt with separately.
Well, yes,
as opposed
of course,
to the discretionary spending.
But I'm
so,
just
no. Hang on. Calm down. I'm not disputing what you're saying.
I know.
I'm just saying that is a multi-headed monster on its own. So I think that this is a good first step. It's a step in the right direction. It shows the priority is to cut spending wherever possible, to shrink the size of government wherever possible. And again, I hope that I expect it's going to take the executive and the legislative branch, and this might be one of those pipe dreams that just can't happen in the polarized political environment that we have now.
Yeah.
But the entitlement restructuring that needs to take place, you're right. It is going to have to happen at some point. It's going to be ugly and it's going to be messy and all kinds of people. I'm probably not going to like it. I don't know who actually will like the reforms that come out of it, but they are necessary because the spending is going to be out of control in these areas. And I don't know about you, Julie. I mean, I've worked my entire life never expecting to get my Social Security that I've paid into.
No, but
I've never expected that it's going to be there.
Yeah, I think that people have reacted to this NPR cutting and PBS cutting. Either it's the worst thing in the world. I mean, I love how you have Judd Apatow. Am I saying that right? Judd
Apatow.
Apatow. Is it Apatow? Anyway, Apatow. Complaining about the high arts being lost. I mean, this is a guy who, makes some pretty vulgar movies, talking about, what are we going to do without, I mean, maybe he could spend a couple $1 million making a movie that isn't about people's private parts. I don't know. Call me crazy. But, Jamie Lee Curtis, who's in movies like Freaky Friday, lecturing us about the high arts. I mean, I just think that I have 800 channels through cable right now. I don't need PBS, and I don't need the government propping up a channel. So it makes sense. But again, cuts to, I mean, these are great things, but $450 million is certainly not going to balance the budget. We do need entitlement reform. We need serious look at Social Security, Medicaid. But again, you're right. Look, the Trump administration's got a lot on its plate right now with Obamacare. They've got to focus on that right now. So obviously, entitlement reform is going to have to wait.
All right, Julie. Listen, we do appreciate you joining us on the program, and I look forward to next week's commentary. I don't know what it's going to be
God,
about.
it won't be on
but,
toilet paper.
We always
It
love.
won't. Let's never do that again.
Just move. Yeah, take the topic out of the bathroom for a
Some
week.
of these issues we don't have to talk about.
Right? Maybe it's springtime. Maybe go into the front yard. You can talk about the nannying for garden regulations in urban areas. People can't have their front yard gardens.
Sounds a little better.
Something along those lines.
Right.
Something. Yeah. All right. We'll talk to you soon,
All right.
Julie.
Thanks, Cam.